parachute pants and those big chunky white socks that are pushed down over your high tops. But Jessica, she did not wear any of these things, and she did not have the typical 80s big hair. Jessica, she was more of an outsider, and she, rather than having that poofy 80s hair, she actually straightened her hair. So she was a little more progressive, I would say, considering what the 90s and 2000s looked like. Also, too, the fact that she was an outsider does not mean in any way that Jessica did not have friends, because she did. She had quite a circle of her own friends, though. They were their own little clique, and she did date quite a bit. So she was not a wallflower or anything like that. She just, was more of an outsider to, I guess, the typical high school cliques. She was really, really smart. I mean, really smart. She was especially selected for an honors program that had this really difficult, accelerated curriculum, and it was easy for her. So Jessica's parents, they were George and Diane, and George and Diane, they split up around the time Jessica was about 7 years old. But when Jessica's parents were still together, when they all still lived with one another, it wasn't a really positive or even safe environment for Jessica's mother. Jessica's father, George, he was a violent man. He also abused alcohol, and he was quite paranoid. He did things such as he would write long letters to politicians about his premonitions for natural disasters, and he also claimed that he had a personal experience with a UFO, and he quite believed that these UFOs existed, and that because he had that experience, he believed that UFOs were a big part of the Bible. So Diane, Jessica's mother, eventually kicked him out of the house, and Jessica would only see him on these occasional visits. And then eventually George was completely out of the picture because he got remarried and he moved away to Tennessee. Jessica's mother, Diane, she also got remarried to a man named Albert Bailey, and from everything I read about this guy, he was very decent, a very nice man. Jessica had this attitude where she pretty much did what she wanted, and that attitude caused a lot of tension in the home. But not only that, it really affected her school life as well. So eventually, when she was in the 10th grade, she was dropped from that honors program because she just wasn't fulfilling what she needed to do to remain in that program. She was not doing any of the work, so she was dropped. Jessica started dating a boy who went to the same school, and his name was Alan Bates, and Alan was really popular. He was so popular that he was elected student body president 3 years in a row. And Alan had a very odd match. They could not understand how these two got together, because Jessica was one of the kids who actually made fun of the popular kids. She made fun of the kids who seemed to have a direction, the kids who wanted to go to college. So it was a really, really odd match, but nonetheless, they really cared for one another, it seemed. Now, after only dating for 2 months, Jessica finds out that she's pregnant with Alan's baby. And so Alan, he was raised as a conservative Christian, so he decided that he should do the right thing and marry Jessica. But the problem was that Alan was only 17 years old, so they waited until Alan turned 18, and a couple of days after he turned 18, they got married, and that was in 1990. After they got married, they moved into Alan's parents so that Alan could finish high school. However, Jessica decided, since she was pregnant and she was going to be a mom, that she was going to drop out of school, and then she would focus on getting her GED later on. About 1 month after their wedding, their daughter was born, and then Alan graduated from high school and he was accepted into college. And that college he was accepted into was an hour away from where they were currently living. And then they ended up moving to a house that Alan's parents helped them buy. And that was really close to the college. So it was one of those starter upper houses. Am I saying that right? One of those houses, like a starter home is I guess what I'm trying to say. It was one of those starter homes. It was quite a fixer-upper, but still nice. So Jessica, she stayed at home taking care of their daughter, and 2 years after their first child was born, they had another child, another girl. So Alan was working and going to school, and Jessica struggled with being a stay-at-home mom. She was pretty young still, and she suffered from quite a bit of FOMO, fear of missing out. She felt isolated, she felt lonely, and she was pretty depressed. And Alan was pretty stressed out himself with being the one working, going to school, and paying all of the bills. So pretty much, if you think about it, Jessica and Alan really didn't know one another very well, because they were just teenagers when they met, and then less than 1 year after they started dating, they were married and they had become parents. So I don't think most people even really know themselves at that time, or the ages in which they were. So when all of this happened, I feel like, quite young. So with all of this going on, with Jessica feeling the way she was and Alan feeling a bit overwhelmed, it was a lot for them. But there was another factor that made things much more stressful, and that was the fact that Jessica was an extremely jealous girl. She hated that Alan was at school and he was spending his days with girls in his classes. She convinced herself that Alan had to be cheating on her, and he wasn't. So they fought a lot because Jessica had to live through while her father was around. That's not to say that Jessica gets a pass or anything like that because of her hardships, because there are plenty of people who have gone through much worse and did not do the things that Jessica ended up doing. Okay, so what Jessica heard about her father was that he had been arrested. So her father, he called 911. This is in 1992. And he very calmly tells the dispatcher that his wife, Olivia, that she was not breathing well and that she was spitting out blood. And he told the dispatcher that he had been beating his wife and that he needed help. When first responders get there, they find Olivia on the floor with multiple severe injuries, and she was barely clinging to life. And she subsequently died. On autopsy, they could not even tell which injury was the fatal one, and that's because she had so many injuries that could have been lethal individually, let alone taken together. So George was arrested immediately, and he was tried on his trial. The day before his trial for first-degree murder, he actually pleaded out on second-degree murder. So now George is in jail, and they get a doctor to evaluate George to, see if he can maybe, I think they were trying to figure out if maybe there was some sort of insanity defense or something like that. So they get a doctor to evaluate him, and so this doctor right away, he starts reading some of George's writings. He kept this notebook that he would write in. And so remember, George spent a lot of time writing to various people about UFOs and his premonitions of natural disasters. And when the doctor read some of these writings, the doctor said that it was textbook schizophrenia thinking. And so when you add that with George's behavior, the doctor diagnosed him as a paranoid schizophrenic, which meant that Jessica was being raised during her young formative years by a father with untreated schizophrenia and substance abuse issues. Not too long after Jessica found out about her father, she decided that she needed to have an identity other than just being a mom. She wanted to make her life better and to make something of herself. So she finally gets her GED and she enrolls in the same college that Alan was going to. She ended up taking just one course because she thought that that would be, something that was not going to be too overwhelming, considering she was taking care of her family as well. So she figured that it would be a good start, this just one class. When Jessica was 22 years old, she started telling her friends that Alan was mean to her and that he was mean to the kids as well. But none of what she was saying about Alan was anything that her friends knew of Alan to be. They really couldn't quite figure out why she was saying this, because they knew Alan to be a really, really nice guy. But some of them thought, well, nobody really knows what happens behind closed doors. So she did end up getting some support from some of her friends. happy for her. It seemed like she was in a better mood and things were going a lot more smoothly now that Jessica had a little bit of a life of her own. So things seemed like they were looking up. That was until Jessica went away for a weekend. She told Alan that she wanted to go to Washington, D.C. so that she could do research for a project for her history class. Even though Alan knew that most 101 level history classes don't require that level of field research, he saw how excited Jessica was about something finally, and he was happy to see her that way. So Alan figured out a way to pay for her to go on this trip. But Jessica was not alone on the trip like she told Alan. She actually went with a classmate. And when Alan, a male classmate, I don't know if I just said that, when Alan found out about it, he knew that it was pretty obvious that Jessica was cheating on him. And he confronted Jessica about it, and then he told her that they were done and that he was moving out. When it came around to the time when Alan was ready to move out, he started to pack his things, and Jessica grabs a knife and tries to attack Alan as he's packing. Later on, when he came back to pick up the rest of his stuff, Jessica had destroyed everything. There was quite literally nothing left for him to salvage. After a little time went by, Jessica was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. So now we can maybe see some of these symptoms and how Jessica behaved. So people with borderline personality disorder, shortened with BPD, people with BPD, they are often quite terrified of abandonment. So with Alan moving out, that obviously triggered her fear. And then people with BPD often can exhibit extreme emotional swings and explosive anger. So at first, Jessica absolutely did not want this divorce from Alan, but Alan did. And Alan told her that he was not going to fight for custody, and he started paying child support right away. He felt that because the kids were little, and due to the fact that Alan was actually a bit old-fashioned, he felt that the girls did belong with Jessica. So he was going to do whatever he could to make sure that the girls stayed with Jessica and that they were supported. And he gave her the house to stay in with the children. So Alan files for divorce in 1994, and it was granted in 1995, and amazingly, it was pretty amicable. Even though Jessica was going to keep the house initially, she did end up moving back in with her mother and stepfather with her daughters so that she would have more support. After Alan graduated, he also moved to Birmingham, which was close by to where Jessica was living with her parents. Alan found a job as a stage manager for what is called the Alabama Theater. So this Alabama Theater is a historic 1920s Birmingham landmark. While Alan was working at this theater, a group from Washington, D.C. came in to assess the building for restoration purposes. And one of the architectural historians She was a very well-traveled and well-rounded woman, and her biggest passion was preserving history. So Alan and Terra, they find a connection right away, and they started to date. And when it was time for Terra to go back to DC, Terra actually stays behind in Birmingham with Alan just because they wanted to see where their relationship would go. So eventually Alan introduces Terra to his daughters, and that went really well as well, except for Jessica. This turned that amicable divorce into something that was no longer amicable. Suddenly, Jessica wasn't feeling so friendly. She resented that Alan had moved on, even though it had been 2 years already and she herself had moved on as well. In 1995, Jessica started dating a guy named Brad, who she met at a local comic book store, and she moved in with him, leaving her daughters with her mother. So Jessica ended up getting pregnant with Brad's child, and Brad was not interested in having a baby, and so they end up breaking up. After Jessica had that baby, Brad did show some interest in seeing his child, but he claims that Jessica made it difficult. She was also making it difficult for Alan to see his 2 girls, but Alan kept on Jessica to see his kids. He got more and more frustrated when he would show up to pick the kids up and they would not be home. That was something that Jessica did often. It was a favorite tactic of hers, that whenever Alan would have a scheduled visit and he would show up to get the girls, they just weren't home. So Alan hired an attorney to start getting the courts involved after he was repeatedly denied his parenting time. So now Alan was not looking for custody. He really still thought that, even with these shenanigans, he still thought that Jessica was a good mother, and he felt that the girls really did need her in their day-to-day lives. All he wanted was the court to enforce the visitation schedule that Jessica had already agreed to. So there was this pattern that Jessica would find herself in, and it was that she would find herself in court quite often. This is when she would not be home to give Alan the girls, so then Alan would take her to court. They would go, the judge would reprimand Jessica, and then she would let Alan see the girls a couple of times before she started keeping them away from him again, and then they would end up back in court. And in the meantime, while all of this was going on, Jessica gets a job at the Birmingham Police Department. She was working as a secretary there. So while she's working there, she meets a police officer, and his name is Jeff McCord. So Jeff, originally, before he became a police officer, he had originally worked with at-risk youth. Jeff was pretty introverted. He really did not socialize with his co-workers. Soon after Jessica started working there, she and Jeff started dating. Now, a lot of people characterized Jeff and Jessica's relationship as Jeff being steamrolled by Jessica, and that's because Jeff was just this really quiet guy. He was very easygoing, and he tried to avoid conflict whenever he could. And then we have Jessica, who, as you can tell, is pretty brash and bold, I would say. But Jessica's job with the police department was not going to last, and here's why. In 1999, Jessica and Alan, they were doing a custody exchange with the girls, and they started to argue, and then Jessica physically assaults Alan. He falls down and he breaks his arm. So the police are called, and Jessica was arrested for assault. Now, Jessica tried to say that it was self-defense, and she shows the officers these scratches on her body as some sort of proof, but it was determined that they were self-inflicted. So, based on this incident, and Jessica had excessive absences from work, so she was terminated from her job at the police department, and Alan was getting more and more frustrated at the restricted visits. So Alan and Terra, they were engaged to be married. They wanted to get married on a specific date in 1999, but Jessica refused to allow the girls to go with him for the weekend, so they ended up having to postpone their wedding date because Alan really wanted to get married with his daughters there. In June of that year, Alan filed a grievance with the court over Jessica not holding up the visitation schedule. Alan then got a job in Maryland, and it was a job that would eventually facilitate his goal of working on Broadway. And because of that, he and Terry decided that he would take the job, so they ended up moving to Maryland. Now, Alan's thinking was that he was already not getting all of his weekend visits with the girls as he was supposed to, and the court really was not doing much to help with that. So he figured that, while he was living in Birmingham, where he currently lived, it did not really benefit him in seeing his girls more. But Alan thought if he moved away and could get an order for longer visits, such as summer breaks and over holidays, that he might actually get more time with them overall. Also, there would be less of an opportunity for Jessica to be able to interfere or cause problems, considering there would be fewer custody exchanges for Jessica to just not show up for. So when Jessica heard about what it was that Alan wanted to do as far as getting his daughters over summer breaks, she complained to Jeff about how bad this would be for the girls. She tells Jeff that Alan had been abusive during their marriage, and that he had even put her in the hospital a few times. Although there are no records of these hospitalizations that she claimed he was responsible for. So basically, Jessica had a news story in different lie, depending on whomever she was talking to. Jeff, he actually believed what Jessica told him. He believed that Alan was a danger to the girls, and he really believed that Jessica was justified in her fear of having the kids flown out to another state for weeks at a time. But regardless, the court visitation schedule did end up changing, and Alan ended up getting the girls for 8 weeks over the summer of 2000. He and Terra picked up the girls in June, and they right away got married at the Alabama theater where they met. And then after that, they took the girls home with them. Also, right before Alan and Terra got married, Jessica and Jeff beat them to the punch, and they got married right before Alan and Terra did. So Jessica's line of thinking was that she was worried that Alan would look better in court after he got married because Jeff was who Jessica was dating at the time they got married to look better in court. Now, after the girls were with Alan and Terra for the 8 weeks over the summer, Alan brought the girls back to Jessica, and it went fairly okay. But what Alan could not know at the time was that Jessica intended for Alan to never be able to see the kids again. You guys won't believe the lengths that Jessica went to in order to keep Alan away from his daughters. Not too long after Alan brought the girls back, Jessica and Jeff move. Jessica would not tell Alan where she moved to, and she would not give him her new phone number. Alan had court-ordered scheduled phone calls to the girls, but not having Jessica's phone number, he could not get in touch with his kids. So he wasn't seeing his kids, and he was not able to talk to them either. And Alan's lawyer was really trying to find them. Jessica even went as far as taking the girls out of school so that Alan's lawyer could not find them. She claimed that she was homeschooling the girls. At one of the court hearings, the judge asked Jessica's lawyer about this homeschooling situation. The judge wanted to know if Jessica was actually homeschooling them, or is just maybe something that she's inventing, and if she is homeschooling them, if she was doing it legally. So, in the state of Alabama, when you homeschool your child, you have to register with your local district as your own private school. And it's not easy. It's not just like you make a phone call and that's it. You have to do quite a bit to do this. And I speak from experience because when my son was 13 years old, he got quite sick. And he and I spent quite a bit of time at the Boston Children's Hospital. And while he was there, I had to get him a tutor. It was actually offered by the hospital. And so he had a tutor, but it became that he was going to the hospital so often that the tutoring really was not benefiting him anymore. So once he got well enough to be home, where he was not having to get transfusions every day and all that, so when he came home, I actually had to register myself as a private school, like my own sole private school, and I'm telling you, it was not an easy process. So where was I now? Oh yeah, so Jessica with her homeschooling and the judge wanting to know, is Jessica doing it legally? So Jessica gives her lawyer some paperwork, some information that looks like, she's on the up and up with this homeschooling situation. So the lawyer, he gives the judge the information that Jessica gave to him, but then this lawyer later finds out that Jessica was actually lying, and so her lawyer gets really upset, and he explains the situation to the judge. So between the lying and the denying visitation, the judge held Jessica in contempt. So the judge was going to make her serve 10 days in jail, but he suspended the sentence for 6 months, provided Jessica complied with the visitation order for 6 months. He would dismiss the charge and she would not have to go to jail. But Jessica not only did not comply, she stopped showing up to court entirely. And when the 6 months ran out, when she should have ended up in jail, she didn't, and that's because she could not be found. And why could she not be found? Well, that's because Jessica and Jeff moved again. Only this time to be sure that she did not receive any mail from the courts or from Alan or Alan's lawyers. Jessica actually took down her mailbox. So whenever mail was sent there, it was sent back to the person who sent it as undeliverable, and it would always come back saying no mail receptacle. And Jeff ended up just getting a P.O. box for all of their other mail, and they would never give out their address. Another thing that Jessica did to keep Alan away is she kept hiring all of these different lawyers to go represent her in court, but then she wouldn't even show up to the court date, and the judge would just issue a continuance. So these tactics were extremely frustrating for Alan because during all of this, he wasn't able to talk to or see his children. When all of this was going on, Jessica was telling people that Alan was the one with the problem. She would say that she would have the girls ready to go and that Alan would cancel at the last minute. She also said that she would arrange for Alan to pick the girls up at her mother's house, but then Alan would just not show up. If you look at court records and the fact that Alan kept like a documented log for the court, and when you look at those, it shows very clearly that Jessica was lying. He wasn't seeing the girls because Jessica was hiding them, and the court just kept giving her more chances. Eventually, Alan and Terra start to discuss their options. They knew that Jessica was not going to follow court orders, not even if she was threatened with jail. So after 1 year of not being able to see his children, Alan decided to file for custody. 1 month after this, the police finally catch up to Jessica in her new home with Jeff and executed the arrest warrant for the contempt charge. Jessica initially said that she was not Jessica McCord. She told them she was actually Jessica's sister. So the police called the station to have them send a picture over of Jessica for comparison, and of course it was her, and she was taken into custody. By this point, Jessica also had another baby with Jeff, so the older 2 girls went to Alan, and then the younger 2 stayed with Jeff. Alan and Terra, they were so happy to have time with the girls, especially since it was over the holidays. But when Jessica got out of jail, she got the girls back, pending the outcome of the custody trial that was scheduled for March of 2002. You guys, can you hear my dog snoring? He's like way on the other side of the room and I can hear him. Oh my god. Okay, so other than the 10 days in jail, Jessica had not really lost anything by ignoring a court order for visitation, not even custody. However, that would not last much longer, and that's because the full custody trial was coming up and things were just not looking good for Jessica. The only documented incident of violence between her and Alan was when Jessica was arrested for assaulting Alan. Not only that, she lied to a judge, she was burning through a bunch of different attorneys, and she spent a year trying to avoid that 10 days in jail on that chances to co-parent with Alan, or at the very least, just not interfere with his parenting time, and she refused to give up any kind of control that she had. But Alan, on the other hand, he had a clean record, and he had never been violent to Jessica. He never caused any issues. And the court really looked at Alan favorably because they felt that the fact that Alan didn't just give up on his kids when Jessica was making it difficult really spoke to what kind of person Alan was. It was a testament to how much he loved his daughters and how much he wanted them in his life. So the court really looked at Alan as calm and collected, whereas Jessica, not so much. So Jessica, she did not want to be the parent without sole physical custody. She did not want to only see the girls on like school breaks and holidays. And she also did not want Terra stepping in and taking any kind of mother role to her girls, even though Jessica had no problem letting her mother parent her children when she was in between relationships. Plus, Jessica had not worked in 2 years, and there was no way that she could afford to lose that child support that Alan was paying. But also, she was not able to pay child support either if the kids went to Alan. So Jessica was going to have to be amenable going forward if she had any hope of retaining any kind of custody. So when Alan's lawyer asked if Alan could have the girls for the weekend of February 15th, 2002, amazingly, Jessica said yes. That's because Jessica knew that she could not afford to look like she was withholding reasonable visits. Now, the reason why Alan picked this weekend in particular was because he was flying from Maryland to Birmingham for his deposition for the custody case. So what he and Terra were going to do was to fly out to Birmingham. They were going to rent a car and then pick the girls up and take them to Alan's parents' home in Georgia for a family weekend get-together. So Alan, he got done with his deposition in the afternoon, and he and Terra went downtown to get something to eat, and when they were doing that, they bumped into a mutual friend of theirs who was somebody they met while working at that Alabama theater, and that person said that he could tell that Alan and Terra were really super excited to go get the girls. They were scheduled to pick the girls up at 6 p.m. at Jessica and Jeff's house, and then they were going to get on the road, and assuming they would stop to eat dinner somewhere with the girls, they should be at Alan's parents' home around 9:30 p.m. So when it became 10 p.m., Alan's family started to wonder where they were. Alan was the kind of person who would check in if he was running late or stuck in traffic. The family called Alan's mobile phone but got no answer, so they waited a little bit, and then Alan's father, his name is Philip, he called Jessica's house because he wanted to know what time Alan and Terra left with the girls. But again, there was no answer on on Jessica's end. So Philip, again Alan's dad, he eventually calls the police in both Alabama and Georgia to see if there's a report of a car accident maybe involving Terra and Alan, but there was not. So Philip calls the police in Hoover, Alabama, which is where Jessica and Jeff live, and he tells the police officer that his son Alan was supposed to have left Hoover at 6 p.m. and he had not made it to Georgia quite yet. So this officer goes out to Jessica's house to do a welfare check, but nobody was home. So hours later, at around 3:15 to 3:30 in the morning of February 16th, a farmer calls 911 saying that there's a fire in the woods outside of Rutledge, Georgia. So the farmer drives closer to where the fire was to see what was going on, and he sees that it's actually not a forest fire. It was a car that was on fire. When the police arrived at around 3:50 in the morning, the fire department already had the flames under control, and they all smelled something odd when they were standing near the back of the car. So they pried open the trunk, and that's when they find 2 charred bodies that were unidentifiable. However, they had a clue as to their identities pretty quickly. The fire was so hot that it had burned the bolts that were holding the license plate on, and that plate fell to the ground, so it wasn't burnt, and the license plate was readable. Investigators ran the plate number, and they find out that the car had been rented at the Avis car rental in the Birmingham airport, which is about 3 hours away. The name on the rental agreement was Alan Bates. At the scene, investigators did not know if these were the remains of Alan and his wife or if they were someone else. They also did not know if Alan was a victim or a perpetrator. They were going to need to track down Alan and Terra's movements that night and make contact with the families to get the dental records for comparison. At the scene, they collected potential evidence, and I won't get into all of the possible evidence they collected, but there were 2 significant pieces of evidence. So one piece of evidence was a partially burnt paper towel that was found just a short distance from the car. It had a print on it that was somewhat distinct. It wasn't just one of those like old plain white paper towels. And the second thing that they found was a bullet that was found in the trunk. So even though the victims had been shot 4 times each, the other bullets had gone right through their bodies, but this one bullet had hit the victim's watch, which slowed the bullet down enough that it did not exit the body. Later on in the morning, Alan's father, Philip, was back on the phone calling police departments asking if there were any accidents, but he didn't know which car Alan was driving. He also knew that he was likely going to have to file a missing persons report, and the make and the model of the car would be important. Philip knew that Alan was going to be renting a car from the airport, so he just started calling the different companies with a kiosk at the Alabama Birmingham airport. And Philip called person who took the call typed in the information and the account was flagged. So he gets his manager on the phone, and the manager tells Philip that he needs to call the GBI, which is exactly what Philip did. At some point that same morning, Jessica called Alan's parents home. She said she was returning their phone call from the night before because they had left her a message just basically saying they were looking for Alan. So Alan's mother, her name is Joan, she tells Jessica that Alan and Terra had never made it to their house, and she asked Jessica if she knew where the kids were. And so Jessica says that the kids were at her mother's house because Alan never showed up to pick the girls up. So of course, they're a little relieved, well, a lot relieved that the children were safe, but of course they're really worried about Alan and Terra. The GBI shows up at Alan's parents' family home to take their statements and to ask for Alan's dental records. But before they even got around to asking for dental records and telling them why, the family was putting it all together, knowing that the GBI does not show up because of a car accident or because an adult couple didn't call their parents about a change in plans. But they patiently answered all the questions asked of them, waiting to find out what the GBI already knew. They explained all about why Alan and Terra were in Birmingham and how they were supposed to pick up the girls from Jessica, but that Jessica said they never showed up. The GBI then told the family about the car, the fire, and the bodies, and they asked for the dental records, and those dental records were matched to Alan and Terra during autopsy. Since Jessica's house was where Alan and Terra were headed that day, the GBI knew that's where they needed to start, and they decided that they were going to talk to Jeff first. So Jeff, remember, as I've said before, he was a police officer, and he was supposed to be at work at 3 p.m. So, since they knew where he was, and that he would be away from Jessica, it would make it easier to get his independent statement. Jeff tells the GBI that Alan never showed up to pick the girls up, so he and Jessica took them to their grandmother's house. That would be Jessica's mother's house. Jeff said they already had belated Valentine's Day plans that they didn't want to cancel, and Jessica's mother was willing to babysit. They then asked Jeff what he and Jessica did the night before, and Jeff tells them that they first went to see a movie, Lord of the Rings, but he said they left that movie and they snuck into a different one. Then they went out all night. Jeff said they drove around, they went to a strip club, they watched the sunrise, and then they stopped at Home Depot to pick something up that they needed for a remodeling project they were doing on their house. When they asked Jeff for verification of any part of this alibi, Jeff pulls out 2 ticket stubs from his wallet for Lord of the Rings. The agents then went to Jessica's house, where they see a note on the front door that says to go around back. Jessica was not home, but her stepfather, Albert Bailey, was. He told them that he was doing some remodeling work on the house and that Jessica had just run to Home Depot. Except that's not where Jessica was, and the agents knew it. They had Jessica under surveillance already, and they knew she was at her mother's house. So they went over to Jessica's mother's house to talk to her, while another officer was keeping an eye on Albert at Jessica's house. When they got to Jessica's mother's house, Jessica insisted on talking to them outside, and the agents suggested that they go back to her house to talk, and Jessica would not do it. She said no. So, standing in front of her mom's house, they tell her that Alan and Terra are missing, and they ask her what she did the previous day. So they did not immediately tell her that their bodies had been found. Jessica gave a similar story as Jeff, but Jessica had a few differences. For one, Jessica said that they waited at the house for Alan, and then they took the kids to her mother's house. But Jessica said they actually took the kids to her mother's house at 5:30 because Alan was supposed to pick them up from there. She said that she would never had allowed Alan at her house. Jessica said that at some point in the evening, she called Alan and she left him a not so nice voicemail asking where he was and berating him for not showing up for the girls again. Jessica said that when Alan did not pick the kids up from her mother's house, that she spoke to her mom on the phone, and her mother agreed to keep the girls so that Jeff and Jessica could stay out on their date night. She said they then went back to her mother's house around midnight to pick up the kids, but the kids were sleeping, so her mom told her to leave them there and come back for them in the morning. So this midnight check on the kids was not something that was in Jeff's story, so it made detectives immediately suspicious of this supposed alibi. Even more so suspicious because there were such significant differences in their stories only less than 1 day later. After hearing Jessica's version of the story, the agents then ask her if they can search her house, and she tells them no. She says that Alan and Terra had never been at her house, so there's no reason for them to search it in connection with their disappearance. At this point, they tell Jessica that Alan and Terra were not just missing, that 2 bodies have been found in the trunk of the rental vehicle, and that they believe that these bodies are Alan and Terra. And that's when Jessica starts to break down and cry. So while the agents are at Jessica's mother's house, the officer that is watching Jessica's house sees her stepfather leave the home in his van with what appeared to be a couch in the back. So he drives around for a little bit, and then he goes to a storage unit, and then he dumps the couch near a dumpster. The police retrieved the couch, and the cushions were missing, and also the fabric on the back of the couch had been cut out. Luminol tests show a small bit of blood on an armrest, but it did not belong to Alan or Terra. They asked Jessica's father why he got rid of the couch, and he said that Jessica had asked him to. The following day, Sunday, February 17th, around 1 p.m., the police had a search warrant to search Jessica and Jeff's house. When they entered the house, they found it to be very messy. There was clutter everywhere, which made it really difficult to search for any kind of trace evidence. The basement family room was in even worse shape because it appeared to be in the process of being remodeled, except that the work being done was very sloppy. The wallpaper from the middle of the wall down, it looked new, and it was striped, but the stripes were not aligned, and the wallpaper wasn't even on straight. So the seams from the newer wallpaper on the bottom half and the older wallpaper on the top, they were not even lined up. So obviously somebody just kind of, threw that together, and it looked to be a rush job. However, there really wasn't much found on that search, but they did end up finding patterned paper towels that matched the one at the crime scene. But because paper towels are mass produced, it really wasn't much evidence, but it did allow them to feel like they needed to stick with this line of investigation. So after they wrap up the search, they ask permission to speak to Alan and Jessica's 2 daughters, and Jessica agrees. So the girls, they weren't there that night, so they really didn't think that they were going to get much from the girls. However, when the officer asked the girls if they noticed anything different about the house when they got back from their grandmother's on Saturday, one of them said that the carpet in the basement had been ripped up and that new wallpaper had been hung. Jessica and Jeff had mentioned that they were remodeling the family room, but this indicated that they had done it overnight while the girls were away. This is the exact time that Jeff and Jessica said they weren't even home. The authorities also checked with the Home Depot that Jeff and Jessica went to, and they found out that all they bought was a box cutter, and agents figured that they bought that to rip off the back of the couch or to rip up the carpet. At that point, police were convinced that under the wallpaper and under the new carpet that there would be some kind of hidden evidence, and that's when they apply for a second search warrant. In the meantime, Jeff was questioned again after the first search, and he continued to deny that he knew anything. He was placed on administrative leave until the situation could be resolved, and he and Jessica ended up taking the girls and going to Florida to stay with Jessica's sister. While they were gone, the second search warrant came through, and this gave the police what they needed. They were able to pull back the new wallpaper, and they found bullet holes in the drywall. And even more so, they found a bullet on the other side of the wall that ballistics matched to the bullet found in the trunk with Alan and Terra's bodies. They also saw something that they missed the first time around because the house was so messy. On the leg of the coffee table in that family room was a small spot of blood. So it was collected and sent to the lab, and it came back a match to Terra. So this is what investigators needed. Arrest warrants for both Jessica and Jeff were issued with this new information, and on Wednesday morning, Jeff did not show up to a hearing about his administrative leave. so he was immediately terminated. But then he and Jessica, they visited the Birmingham office of a well-known defense attorney, and that attorney ended up not representing them. Nobody knows why, but it's people think it's because they just could not afford him. But because they did this, it showed that they were no longer in Florida and that they were actually in the area. On February 21st, the police were tipped off that Jeff and Jessica were hiding out at a friend's house and they were arrested. But the children, they were still in Florida. Both Jeff and Jessica were charged with capital murder, and the state was seeking the death penalty in both cases. It was determined that Jessica and Jeff would be tried separately. Over the next year, while waiting on Jessica's trial, authorities were busy building the case they had with these two big pieces of evidence, which were the bullets and Terra's blood in the house. Both Jeff and Jessica insisted that Terra was never there. Then the state went on to build a circumstantial case based on the inconsistencies in Jessica and Jeff's stories. For one, when the kids went to Jessica's mother's house that night, not only did their stories not match each other, the police talked to the kids' babysitter, and the babysitter said that she was the one that dropped the kids off at Jessica's mother's house. So Jeff and Jessica did not even have the kids at all. They also, Jeff and Jessica, could not decide where Alan was supposed to pick the kids up from, with just saying the house, Jessica saying her mother's house. So the police checked with the attorneys who set up the visit, and they confirmed that pickup was at Jessica's house. Jessica and Jeff also said they were driving around that night doing a bunch of different things, but their mobile phone records show that they had driven towards Georgia that night. They also ran Alan's mobile phone records, and they find that when Jessica called Alan to see where he was, Alan's phone was pinging at a cell tower within 1 mile of Jessica's house. And then there's the other part of this story that Jessica told, where she says she called her mother, except it was from a payphone when they were supposedly in the movie. So Jessica said she stepped out of the movie to go buy some antacids, and that's when she made the call to her mom. But the call was made 2 miles away from the theater, so that meant she would have had to pass multiple other stores just to get to that one she said she was at. As the case was being built against her, Jessica was trying to get bond. She was pregnant with her 5th child, so she wrote to the judge asking if she and Jeff could be bonded out for the birth. That way they could bond with the baby. But Jessica showed that she was not going to follow a judge's instructions if she did not want to. She had lied in court, and she had hid out to avoid arrest. So the judge just did not feel comfortable giving her a bond. So after she had the baby, the baby was placed with Jessica's mother, and Jessica went back to lock up. So now there was also a third person that the police were looking at in in regards to Alan and Terra's deaths, and that was Jessica's stepfather, Albert Bailey. He was the one that was at the house cleaning up the scene. He disposed of the couch, and he went to a storage unit that police believe was used to store evidence before it was taken to the dump. The question was, what did Albert know? Was he just helping out because Jessica asked him to, or did he know he was cleaning up a murder scene? But then in June 2002, just 4 months after the murders, Albert died of a heart attack at 59, and Jessica's trial began and ended in February 2003, 1 year after the murders. And the trial only lasted for 4 days. So the state, because it was circumstantial, they had to give the jury a theory of what happened that day. So they said that they believe that Jessica put a sign on the front door saying that the door was broken, and for them, Alan and Terra, to come around the back. Then after Alan and Terra arrived, Jessica had some pretense to convince them to come inside and sit down, and while they were there, someone shot them both. Most likely Jeff, who he had firearms experience as a police officer. They then theorized that Jessica and Jeff spent the rest of the night cleaning up the scene and disposing of the bodies. They said that the motive was rage and control, that Jessica blamed Alan for her 10 days in jail for contempt, and that she was about to lose custody of her girls. So now Jessica takes the stand and she shows no sympathy for Alan or Terra's deaths. She complained how Alan wasn't really even that interested in the kids, and that he had traveled with the theater shows, barely showing up for visits. She said that she would get the kids ready and then he would just not show up. She explained that they had to get rid of the carpet and the couch because it was damaged from their dog, and that they were going to reupholster the couch, not throw it away. So that's why the fabric was cut out. But then they realized that it would not be worth the time or expense, so Jessica just asked her stepfather to get rid of it for her. And then she also went on to say, and this is the most ridiculous statement, she actually said that all of those court dates that she missed, that she was actually there, but that Alan's attorney just did not see her. As for the bullet hole in the wall, she explains that Jeff had accidentally fired his gun one day in the house. So pretty much Jessica had an answer for everything. And she also claimed that she had never seen Alan nor Terra after the deposition. The cross-examination by the state was basically just unraveling all of Jessica's lies, but also Jessica's mother, Diane, took the stand in Jessica's defense. She had given Jessica an alibi for when Jessica said she stopped in at midnight to come pick up the kids. So, 31-year-old Jessica was found guilty after about 2.5 hours of deliberation. Then, in a 7-5 vote, they recommended the sentence to be life without parole rather than the death penalty. So this judge, he was not bound the jury's recommendation, but he was going to sentence Jessica in April after Jeff's trial. But Jeff, he saw how things went for Jessica with the same evidence they had against him, and he cut a deal. The deal was he would tell the police exactly what happened that day, and he would testify in any future court proceedings related to the case, and that would be in exchange for a life with parole sentence. So when Jeff told the story, he just confirmed that the theory of the crime presented in the trial was pretty much spot on. Jeff said that Jessica would bring up wishing Alan dead, saying that they should kill him, and Jeff said that he would blow her off, until she came up with a plan to do it when Alan came to pick up the girls on February 15th. And instead of telling her no, Jeff just agreed to help, and he said that he did it because he was convinced by Jessica that Alan was abusive and controlling. He said that Jessica and himself, they agreed that if Terra was with Alan when he came to pick up the girls, that they were going to have to kill Terra as well. Jeff said they used the sign on the front door to get them to go to the back, which led to the downstairs family room. Jessica told them that the girls were ready to go, but that they had wanted to show their dad a puppet show that they had prepared for him, and that Jessica went upstairs to get the girls. So Alan and Terra sat on the couch making small talk with Jeff. Then Jessica came back down the stairs and she sat on the steps, and that was Jeff's cue. He pulled out his gun from behind his back and he shot Terra first. Alan stood up and Jeff turned and fired at Alan. Once Alan was on the ground, he shot Terra again to be sure she was dead. Jessica then backed Alan's rental car up the driveway to get closer to the back door. Wrapping the bodies in blankets, they carried them to the trunk. Jeff then collected the bullets, except he thought he fired 6 shots for some reason. So when he recovered these 6 bullets, he had assumed he had gotten them all. He did not realize that he had actually fired 8, leaving 1 in the house and 1 in Alan's body, which would link him to the killings. He and Jessica then drove with Jeff in the rental car and Jessica in the minivan. They first set up their alibi by buying the movie tickets and having Jessica use the payphone on the way to Georgia. Jeff dismantled and scattered the pieces of the gun along the highway. At 2 a.m., they doused the car in gasoline, but they had trouble getting it to catch fire, so they lit the paper towels on fire and threw those in. And of course, one of those towels had blown away, and that was the one that the investigator had found. When Jeff and Jessica got back home and saw how much blood evidence and bullet holes were in the house, Jessica recommended that they torch the home to destroy it. But Jeff knew that if they lit their house on fire, that it would look way too suspicious for Alan and Terra to have a car fire that same night. So they decided to clean and cover up whatever they could. But Jeff told investigators that they actually thought they would have more time if they reported them missing. And that the family was already working with the GBI. They knew they needed to act fast, which just led to more sloppiness. In accordance with the plea deal, Jeff was given a life with the possibility of parole, and Jessica was given a life without parole. And then they got divorced very shortly after, and Jessica legally changed her name back to Jessica Bates, keeping Alan's last name. Oh my gosh, can you imagine Alan's family, what they must have thought when she did that? That would drive me insane that she did that. So the state, they also decided that they were going to charge Jessica's mother, Diane, for perjury, for providing that false alibi for Jessica. So Diane, she said she pleaded not guilty, and she testified that it wasn't intentional. She was just confused, or she misremembered. At the time of the murders through the time of the trial, Diane had a lot going on. She was caring for her elderly parents, and her father had died around 6 weeks after Jessica's arrest. Then her husband died a few months after that. Then Jessica's newborn came to live with her with the other children. So Joan was 58 years old. She was working, and she was taking care of Jessica's children and her own mother. And then on top of that, she was grieving her husband and her father. She said that the stress led to her testimony being unintentionally not true. But Diane was found guilty of perjury, and she was given an 8-year sentence. But they gave her to her as 1 year of work release and 7 years suspended. She was raising and supporting 2 of Jessica's children, who she would raise until her own death in 2017. Jessica's 5 kids were split up. Alan's family took custody of the 2 oldest, even though Jessica was now saying that the oldest child was not even Alan's biological child. So what do you guys think of Diane, Jessica's mother, being brought up on charges? I'm interested to know what you guys think, because I definitely have my own opinion about that, but I want to see what you guys think before I even say anything, because I feel like most people are going to disagree with me. Maybe not, though. Thank you so much for listening.